Tonight on W5, we'll look at the smoldering unemployment crisis in industrial northeast England.
I can see people becoming so angry that they will take action which up to now they have not attempted to take because they regarded it as unconstitutional.
We'll see how well Halifax is prepared to combat an expected invasion of heroin.
I mean, if I wanted to, I'm sure I could get heroin in a half an hour if I wanted to.
And we'll investigate the deadly business of chemical and biological warfare and what Canadian scientists are doing about it.
I think it's totally improper for them to be working on chemical agents to derange normal thinking or to chemical agents to hurt people in any way at all.
Good evening, I'm Jack McGaw, and this is the first episode of our 6th season. When helicopters bombed Attica Prison with CS gas or tear gas this week to begin the slaughter of inmates and their hostages, it should have become clear to us that chemical warfare is an integral part of North America's defense of law and order. Attica proved that war chemicals developed in the United States are not designed to replace bullets, but to assist them. And Canada is deeply plugged into this whole deadly business of inventing new chemical agents, all in the name of defense. We are trying to get all nations to agree not to use biological weapons at all, and to use chemical weapons only for defense. But we continue to spend about $7 million a year to support a military science that's been described as public health in reverse, in which diseases become useful and chemicals that irritate or derange the mind become effective. Canada's Chemical and Biological Warfare Center is at Suffield, Alberta, about 150 miles southwest of Calgary. And the man who directs the research activity is Dr. William Stewart, an affable medical doctor who specializes in the treatment of nerve gas poisoning, though he boasts he's never had to use his training at Suffield. We were the first television crew to be allowed inside Suffield, and so Dr. Stewart and his staff were a little tense when we raised the question of secrecy and press criticism.
We have had our lumps from the media, I would suggest, in the past. And this is probably why they tend to be a little nervous, not because of secrecy, really. It's true we have certain security regulations, but most of our work is published in the open literature. Much of it is. And our scientists are quite free to talk about the kind of work they do, perhaps not as completely as they would be in ordinary civilian life.
You could be in a situation where you have a group of men occupying a fortification or any kind of a position, actually, as far as natural terrain is concerned, and you want to remove them in the easiest fashion. If you can use incapacitants and attack them before they know it's on them, which of course is a problem in itself, there are agents that can be used which will incapacitate these individuals. And it does it in different ways, and again, here is where you have to consider what kind of compounds you're using to produce the incapacitation as to what will happen to the men.
The rats in these boxes are being trained to react to a light stimulus. Automatic equipment wired to a computer switches on a light inside one side of their shuttle boxes, and that gives them 5 seconds to move to the other side before a slight electric current is passed through the floor. They learn quickly to avoid the shock. And then they're injected with psychochemicals or incapacitants to measure their sluggishness or their confusion. The chemicals could be LSD, BOL 148, scopolamine, or the standard agent with the code name BZ.
Ideally, what we would like to do is to, one, physically incapacitate them. They either cannot move or they move very slowly, such as the animals in the shuttle boxes, but again, you have to be careful. You can't draw a direct correlation here. Or you may end up with a group of men who can move quite all right, but they've completely lost all motivation to fight. They, you might almost say it borders on a state of intoxication. They're having too much of a good time, enjoying the effects of the drug, than to be bothered with trying to shoot somebody as they try to take a position.
Our policy, as you know, is defensive, and this is sincerely true. It has always been defensive.
Isn't there information passed between the Allies, though? I mean, isn't Canada tied up in this whole business of...
There is an arrangement between governments for exchange of information in certain fields, including these. We put information into this system, and we receive information from it. Again, it all boils down to what the information is used for. We are using it to provide defenses for the Canadian forces, and for no other purpose.
But in effect, this country is part of a system which could become offensive. Is that not true? I mean, I'm not trying to twist words.
No, it isn't true. We are signatories of the Geneva Convention, which says that we will not initiate the use of chemical or biological weapons. So we would not be involved in offensive chemical warfare, for example. And historically, we never have been. In the First World War, we received attacks, but we never delivered any in chemical warfare by the Canadian forces.
But here's evidence that at one time we were all set to use chemical weapons. 1 million pounds of liquid mustard gas is stored in these steel and concrete bunkers at Suffield. But that's a legacy from the 1940s, when we felt we had to be ready for an enemy that might break the Geneva Convention of 1923. Today, at Suffield, we don't stockpile chemical or biological agents, and we don't develop weapons to deliver them. The 40-odd scientists at Suffield spend much of their time devising chemical and biological detectors and protection equipment, and they try them out on troops in the experimental range. There's 1,000 square miles of barren land out here, the largest tract of undisturbed prairie in North America. Some of it has been bombed with chemical agents, but most of the testing now is with simulants, which are harmless to man. This man is wearing a Canadian-developed protection suit that repels dangerous vapors. He's using a special detector to determine whether liquid nerve gas simulant has been sprayed on the ground. If the detector says the area is clean, he'll then be able to take off the suit. However, there is a catch.
If there were to be an attack of nerve gas, is there a test to determine when he should put it on?
If nerve agents are used, most certainly we have detector kits, vapor detectors, which will tell us that the agent is coming or is there.
However, it wasn't explained that detector kits are not standard issues for Canadian Forces personnel, nor that in any event, nerve gas has no color, taste, or smell, and it's fatal within seconds. Dr. Ursula Franklin is a University of Toronto physicist who has become one of Canada's sternest critics of chemical and biological warfare research. She leads the Voice of Women campaign against chemical biological warfare.
The argument that has been put forward against the use of chemical and biological agents is there is no protection. That is, there is no protection for the people, there's no protection for the environment. Now, I, as a Canadian, do not feel that it is justified for my government to put 25 years of research into encasing a few young men into an impermeable environment and saying the rest is none of my responsibility. Because if you talk to these people, everyone will tell you, no, we make no provisions for the population, and certainly there are no provisions conceivable for the environment, which in fact is a lot more touchy than even people. Now, that's defensive, fine, but so what?
By no means are all of the things we do here classified to the point that they are not available or usable in the civilian population. It's always been that way.
There were some lanate poisonings in Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan and Alberta, when lanate as an insecticide was used to combat the armyworm. Now, were you involved in that at all? Were you
No,
called
I
in?
wasn't.
Were you asked about it? Were you asked to study it?
I believe that certain information is required of the Defense Research Board in general and possibly of this station in particular, but I was not personally involved. Quite frankly, I'm quite unfamiliar with this compound and its mode of action.
It is similar to the one you're working with, though.
I don't believe so.
Is it not an insecticide which is similar to nerve gases?
Well, if that's the case, then this will fall into the same category.
Actually, insecticides are getting a lot of attention at Suffield. Engineers invented this furnace for burning 107,000 gallons of military DDT, but at the moment there are no definite plans for disposing of civilian stocks. The station also has Canada's largest shock tube for measuring stress under simulated nuclear explosions. It could be used in civilian aerodynamics, but it gets only military assignments. This is a test of a new fiberglass bomb shelter door designed for the EMO. In the microbiology labs, the Henderson aerosol apparatus keeps germs in a spray form. That's for testing the susceptibility of small animals. It'll be used for examining biological agents that may be picked up by Canadian forces in the north, though it could also be valuable in analyzing new influenza strains contracted by civilians. Biological warfare is as effective in killing or incapacitating civilian populations as a nuclear bomb. But like the bomb, it now has only strategic value. And besides, there's a high accident risk in trying to spread the plague, tularemia, or encephalitis. President Nixon condemned biological warfare last year, but critics maintain that American biological research is continuing in secret at just the same pace, and offensive biological agents are being developed in the United States. In chemistry, Canadian military scientists are engaged in some of the same kinds of experiments as U.S. military scientists, although on a much smaller scale. They're trying to find the most effective psychochemicals for incapacitating an enemy, and they're looking for tranquilizers that'll put him to sleep. However, Canada's research is done only to find the appropriate antidotes or to develop protective procedures and equipment. But in the meantime, we may have added substantially to the allied knowledge of potential weapons. Dr. Tom Perry is a professor of pharmacology at the University of British Columbia with a different kind of lab. He's already discovered a cure for homocystinuria, a rare but fatal form of mental retardation in children caused by a chemical imbalance in the body. A 6-year-old Kamloops boy has been taking treatment in this lab so that he could become normal and lead a normal, mentally healthy life. The boy's cure was a chemical, and Dr. Perry is experimenting to find other chemicals that could cure other kinds of mental illness.
Whenever I publish a paper that relates, for instance, to schizophrenia or to any chemical compound that I do find or that I don't find in the urine or the blood or the spinal fluid of patients with schizophrenia, I've had a large number of requests for reprints of my work from military addresses in the United States, particularly Fort Detrick in Maryland and Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. And I began, when these reprint requests began to number up into many, many hundreds, I began to wonder why this tremendous interest in neurochemistry in these institutions. And frankly, I've come to the conclusion that people who are developing offensive methods of chemical warfare in the United States are very much interested in any chemical compound that might cause severe mental illness because they would like to imitate it or make an even more potent one. And it's disturbed me enough that I have given up the practice of sending any requests for sending any reprints to military addresses.
The military scientists in the United States, or our scientists here for that matter, send to our scientific colleagues for reprints, and we get them quite freely. We don't think it particularly suspicious if someone asks us for information, and I don't see why they should be suspicious if we ask them.
Well, the suspicion, I think, stems from the fear that the information he is developing, which may be life-giving, might, in military hands, be death-giving, death-causing.
he can't keep it out of military hands if he publishes it in the open literature. I don't know whether he should or not. As far as Canadian use is concerned, I don't think he has much to fear.
It makes me very uneasy, frankly, because every time I do an experiment and it's successful, I wonder, should I publish it? Is it going to be misused by the military in the United States or elsewhere in the world? And is what I find out going to be used for the right purposes that I want it used for, or may it be used for the wrong purposes? And it sometimes makes me wonder, should I publish it at all?
Anyone who has looked at the troops going into the prisons in New York State in full gear, gas mask, and protective suits will have felt that this is chemical warfare at home. These are the incapacitating agents that places like Suffield have tested. Now, do we feel comfortable at the thought of having to use these in what our Prime Minister calls the support of civilian power? But the use of civilian power, if that support is needed. And so I would think that I would sleep a lot more calmly if I would know that these things would not be done in Suffield. Knowledge is what we need, but knowledge cannot be a tool of power, whatever power it is.
Well, as you can see, the scientists at Suffield are dedicated people, and they honestly believe their work is useful in protecting Canadian troops. There was very little secrecy, and the experiments we saw didn't appear to be dangerous, although a few of them are classified, so we have no way of knowing for sure. The point is that Canada has new defense priorities, the first being the protection of Canadian sovereignty. And with a minimum disturbance of our commitment to NATO, we could get out of CBW altogether and put Suffield to work perhaps in the new Department of the Environment, studying pollution in the north and insecticide pollution in the south. After these messages, W5's Ode to a Streetcar.
They're new. They're light, lacy, softly rounded, naturally lovely. The new Cross Your Heart beautiful ones for perfect shaping in a see-through bra. The exclusive Cross Your Heart styling lifts and separates. Suddenly you're shapelier and prettier in cool, airy, feminine lace. For perfect shaping in a see-through bra, the Cross Your Heart beautiful ones from Playtex.
See any hair on my face? Go ahead, take a good look. I just finished shaving with the new Schick Super Chronochrome blade. This one. I switched to Super Chronochrome, and it gave me the smoothest shave I ever had. It gave me the most comfortable shave I ever had. And it's gonna do the same for you. My name's Angelo Mosca, and if you think I'm lying, come and tell me to my face.
Schick Super Chronochrome. True comfort.
Mark 10, Mark 10. There's a certain satisfaction that can really make your day. Mark 10.
That's how it is with Mark 10 cigarettes. Great little moments of real satisfaction. They come naturally with Mark 10. The cigarette with a certain satisfaction.
Mark 10. There's a certain satisfaction that can really make your day. Mark 10.
Mark 10. A certain satisfaction.